was at Carleton, and I came out one time. And it was like really early in the morning because we had like sometimes it was early classes, and you had to get up and get ready and all this garbage and kind of associate with garbage because here was a raccoon just like right in, and like I have never seen a raccoon full front, like full in your face, and here it
Full
was just like
frontal, a full frontal raccoon.
Yeah, just like right.
That
right
would be
there.
terrifying.
Yeah. John, to start off, I want to ask you kind of like I guess a little bit of a fun question, but like, have you ever been to Newfoundland? I feel like people are going to be like, is he serious right now? But I want to ask you, because where I asked that, your first time being in Newfoundland, what was the experience like? Were you kind of blown away, pun intended, or was it kind of like, oh my God, I want to leave now?
Well, I'm from Halifax originally, so fellow Atlantic province, team member.
Team member, yeah.
However you want to put it. But I had a lot of friends in university from St. John's in Corner Brook. And one of my friends from Corner Brook said, you should really go to Gross Mourne, because I like to camp. And she said, you should really check out Gross Mourne. So I took the ferry from Cape Breton over to the West Coast, and I stayed there for a week, and I couldn't believe that there wasn't more people talking about it, because you hear about all the fjords in Scandinavia, and people come from all over the world, and I'm thinking this is an hour and a half flight from Halifax, and I don't understand why everybody from Halifax isn't coming here to do this. Everybody in Canada isn't coming here to do this, and it was spectacular. And then we spent some time on I can't remember what the name of the beach was, but it was in the summer. It was this beautiful white sandy beach, and I got introduced to tuckamore trees.
Okay.
Because it was very windy when we were there too, but it was so warm out. And I just remember it being a pretty incredible experience. And so, yeah, when I knew that I was going to be coming back here for the show, I was very excited to come back, but I had never been to St. John's. So that was a whole other experience.
Yeah, I want to ask you, because you mentioned about being a fellow East Coaster. Like, I want to ask you really, because if you came to Newfoundland, like, was MUN ever an option for you? Because I know you went to a university there in New Brunswick, but like, because I'm from Newfoundland. I did a year at MUN, and I was kind of like, I like it, but to me, it just felt like a bigger high school. And I was like, I want to kind of expand a little bit. So then I was looking at Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. I ended up going to Ottawa, but was that like ever on your radar where it was like I'm an East Coaster. It's only about an hour and a half away, so I can still come home, but it'd be nice to see Newfoundland. Was that ever an option?
Ottawa, is that the GGs?
Yeah. No, don't, not GGs with me. I'm a Raven. I'm a Carleton student.
Oh, Carleton. My apologies.
Yeah,
my apologies.
I touched a sore spot there. No.
Yeah, that's the enemy. That's the
yeah. But yeah, so like mention though, like, was it ever like an option to go to MUN? Because I know I think it's like Mount Allison you went to, correct?
Yeah. I'm impressed you know that. So I went to Mount A. I ended up going to Mount A because I wanted to play football. I played while I was there. And unfortunately, there wasn't a team here, but I had applied to MUN. I applied to 4 schools: MUN, Acadia, Mount Allison, and Dal. And Dal was in Halifax, so I just figured, I feel like I kind of need to venture out on my own a little bit. And then, so it really came down to Acadia and Mount A to be able to play football. But when I graduated, I before, or like once I got my undergrad, I thought that I might try and go to MUN to go to med school. But I took a year off and I started acting, and then I went to theater school instead in Dublin. So, yeah, it was kind of a complete turn. But then Dublin very much reminded me of home, of Halifax. And then when I came to St. John's, it reminded me so much of St. John's. It felt so familiar, just very similar, culture and feel and connectivity of the people. And so it kind of felt full circle, even though I wasn't here for university. It felt like, a level of that this was right. This was, I was supposed to be here, and it was a good fit.
So take me through that process of, because like, for me going from Newfoundland to Ottawa, or anytime someone's like, well, like I had dreams when I was in like university, even that I wanted to be like an actor or on SNL, or like, cause I was like, cause you'd get people in your class. It's like, you are quietly funny. And I'm like, what does that even mean? It's like, well, you're not a class clown, but when there comes a joke and you see an opportunity, you just go for it. I'm like, that's all right. That's weird. Like a backhanded compliment, but sure. But you're going basically from Halifax to Dublin. Like that does not even cross my mind. Like that sounds like something like a 14 or 15-year-old will threaten their parents with. Like, if I don't get my way, I'm going to Dublin. And they're like, let John be John. But like, what goes through your mind? Because like you want to be an actor, but at the same point, why Dublin? Like what made you apply there, or say, this is where I want to go?
Oh yeah.
To be honest, a friend dared you. A friend dared you, and you're like, all right, yeah.
I mean, it's more in line with that than as some kind of master plan. Certainly, I wish that I could say that there was some form of strategy involved. It kind of really just ended up, because I actually didn't go straight to theater school. I worked for a little while. I'd done a lot of theater when I was a kid, and then I kind of got out of it when I started, high school and university. I was kind of involved with other things, and then, but kind of in the back of my head, I was like, oh, the acting thing still kind of appeals to me. And so after I had finished at Mount A, I, decided to get back into it a little bit, and I got a few jobs, which sort of, I had been a poor student, and then all of a sudden I had, some money, and I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. I'm not sure I want to go back to, go right back to school. And so, yeah, I worked for a while, and then I ended up doing a few TV series. And then my wife actually suggested, at the time, we weren't married at the time, but she suggested, oh, we should go to London and take, there was a class at a place called the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where they do Shakespeare. I would teach Shakespeare for 4 months, and we had done some when we were younger. So we were like, oh yeah, this would be fun to, be involved in this and do a play. And so we did that together. And then at that point, I met the teachers that suggested that I come to Dublin, school that was opening up there. And that sort of, so it took me a little while to get there from, I had already become a little jaded at that point, maybe, or understood how, not crucial I was to the industry. And so it was a very good experience to go and sort of ignite my excitement for the job, and to come back feeling like I really had a handle of what I was doing.
That's fair. I won't leave you high and dry on that one. Like when you said about jadedness, it's like I remember being at Algonquin, and you'd have people come in, because I was in radio, and you'd get like guest speakers come in, and they'd be like, yeah, you'll be doing unpaid internships. I'm like, wait, so I have to move to Toronto, Calgary, wherever, and I get unpaid? And they're like, we're paying you an experience. I'm like, what a cop out. And then it'd be like, but you have to send us your demos. I'm like, I don't know, I'm like 20 odd, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, if you want me so bad, why don't you listen to our radio station and see which people you want? And then when you get older, you're like, you don't have the time of day to listen to every radio station. Like, you have to be driven enough to send it out. But being a 20-year-old, I was just like, it's like, screw you guys. You want me? It's like, you come find me.
Yeah.
Not like the other way. Now, when you get older, you're like, oh man, how are they expected to find you? There's so many radio stations. There's so many platforms. You have to kind of be like, hey, check this out. And then they'll be like, hey, you know what? He took the time to send it to us. We'll check it out. And now he's on our radar. But yeah, 20-year-olds don't think like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of like a gauntlet to walk. And I guess that's sort of part of it, is you never really get to the other side of it until you've actually, done it and paid your dues. And of course, when, you're in your 20s, it's like you have all the time in the world, and it's all going to fit into place. And then you don't realize that all the stories of people who have kind of come into these opportunities and everything, there was a lot of preparation and a lot of like you say, grinding and sending stuff out to kind of make that come to fruition.
Do you remember, like, because I know we've asked this with Mako, and I believe we asked it with Justin on their episodes, but do you remember like your first ever like acting credential, or like even your first kind of your acting moment where you thought like, okay, I made it, but when you look back at it, you're kind of like, oh, it's like, that's kind of cringy.
That's a really good question. I would still say that I don't feel that way. I feel, I've always kind of been of the mind that whatever I'm working on at the time could end at any time. So I don't think I've ever sort of really felt, okay, here I am, I'm safe. I'm in the spot that I want to be. But I do remember when I had I second guessed whether or not this was the right industry for me, when I had done a few things in Halifax, and I decided that I needed to move to Toronto if I was going to have an opportunity to to work on some larger productions and stuff like that. And my first audition in Toronto, I walk into the room, it's jam packed with people who look exactly like me but 2 inches taller and more muscular, and then they take me into the sort of back room, and they're like, okay, now turn around and we're going to photograph the back of your head. And I remember thinking,
why?
What? And they're like, yeah, it's a shampoo commercial, and we are we want the person with the perfect back of the head. And so before I really knew what they took a photo, and I was done, and I was out, and then I didn't get it, and I was just like, wow, like I've moved all the way to Toronto, and the back of my head wasn't even good enough, to get a job. Like, what am I doing? Unfortunately, I held out for a little bit longer, but it was one of those moments where you're like, okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see how this is going to be. I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to set up some, I'm going to have to set up some boundaries with, how, how I take in things from the industry and stuff.
There was probably people there that were just head and shoulders above, Like,
oh, that was good though. It was quick.
Yeah, that was good. It was quick enough. It was on the fly. But no, I understand where you're coming from, because actually I found this because I was like, we are going to be talking about a bit of acting. So like, much like you, now you want to be in football when you were younger, like that, you want to be a pro athlete. I originally thought, okay, I want to be in broadcasting, but I wanted to be kind of in acting. Now, I kind of try to keep my boots in that, like sometimes Hudson and Rex will come out with stuff and be like, hey, we're filming in Witless Bay. I'm like, great. And then I'd be like, I have to be the only person that like wants this gig. It's like, no. And I'm like, crap. So I found this. This was when I was in like junior high. It's like, I guess it went straight to VHS. That's how good it was.
Oh,
not
yes.
even in movies. It's just called Peer Pressure and No Drugs. So
yes.
Yeah, it's like 7 minutes, but like, dude, we couldn't even show this. Look, like that's how bad it was. Right to VHS. And you know how many we sold? 3. No, no.
Is that a PSA?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it is a PSA. It's like something like when you go into school and they want to kind of give the smart kids a break. Like, you know, they're just like, yeah, you can go to MUN for like a week and figure out what you want to do with your life. I'm like, acting. I want to be in acting.
Yeah.
And then I think I've like one guy that was giving us the directions was like, yeah, can you take direction? I was like, not really. It's like I'm in my own world over here. So
well, I mean, you've got the VHS though. You've got you have proof.
This is my demo reel for like when they're looking for kid actors. I'll be like, here, and they'll be like, oh, can you bring in your kid? I'm like, no, that's me. And they're like, you don't look like that anymore. I'm like, but I got the job, right? And they're like, get out.
You need some new material, Brian. You need some new materials. Yeah. Something a little more current.
Yeah, I'll send them like interviews or podcasts, and then they'll be like, so what role do you want to play on the show? I was like, I'll be like that podcast guy that like hacks into systems, and they're like, we've done episodes on that already. I'll be like, okay, well, you know, do a few more.
Well, you know, podcasts are, you know, they're pretty popular right now. So I think there's always room for 2 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So you be careful, John. By the end of this, I will pitch myself into the show and I'll give you a script, and then someone's going to be like, man, why didn't we use that episode? And I'll be like, because it was Tobin. It was Tobin. We don't use stuff from Tobin.
Tobin and Rex.
Yeah, Tobin and Rex. They'd be like, but I like Charlie. I'd be like, well, he kidnaps Charlie, and that's how this whole thing comes about. I want to ask you, of course, with Hudson and Rex, like you wrapped up now season 4. People can watch season 4 wherever they want to. I think there's numerous platforms you can watch that. But we have mentioned this to Mako, and I want to get your kind of interest or take on it. The whole mobile unit, because I remember getting into Mako a little bit about like how I did not like the mobile unit at the beginning, because I was like, each one of you had your own thing. And then I was like, I think the first episode could have been either season 3 or season 4. It's brought into place, but I was like, what's on to go with the mobile unit? Like, what was the idea behind it?
So I think that I think the big thing that was the attempt to keep us all together. I mean, one of the big selling features of the show is being out in the world in St. John's, and it's one of the only shows that I think really, one of the only Canadian shows that really, says it is where it's shot and tries to highlight it really well. It's one of the best aspects of our show. So it was kind of an effort to bring all of us out into the field where we could have kind of these big sweeping landscapes. And actually, I believe the first mobile unit episode was actually shot in Witless Bay.
Nice.
So
I wasn't involved. I wasn't involved, John. Thanks a lot. No.
I mean, is that why you don't like the mobile unit? Because I feel like
you got me. You got me. No.
You have to like it now. It was in Witless Bay.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. There's going to be an audience out there now that's like, oh, he got him here. I'm like, you know what? That's fair. I just always thought it was kind of like when I first was watching it and the first couple of seasons, like, okay, I get it. Like, I get why we're going to this scene. We're going to a lab because this is where she is. We're going to like a computer like station because I'm like, this now all ties in of how they solve this case. When it's all of you together and it's like, listen, you can take offense if you want to, but I was like, is this like real life Scooby-Doo? Like, am I watching Scooby-Doo here?
I see the Mystery Machine.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that, but now that you're bringing it up, I kind of love that. Like maybe the mobile unit just needs to be a little more retro.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair.
You just need to kind of just,
like, I mean, I can picture it for you. Like, like you got Jesse as Shaggy, you got, obviously Rex is Rex. Like, he can be Scooby-Doo, like, Thelma, Louise, you got it all there, but whatever the other characters, but yeah, Fred, there you go. But yeah, I don't like buy that idea. Cause I would hate to see it where it's like, yes, after season 5, we're done. Why? What happened? Well, this guy Tobin pitched it to John and John turned it into Scooby-Doo and we didn't like it. So now it's over. And then there'd be an audience be like, where's Tobin? Can we find Tobin? We want him canceled. I'd be like, please, no.
I'm just trying to think who I'd be in that scenario. I'm thinking Daphne. Would I be Daphne?
Sure, if you want to be
Or
Daphne, man, like it's fair.
yeah,
I was thinking more like Fred, but you know, if you want to be
you're Fred.
Daphne, yeah.
Fred, but I guess Kevin. Kevin's like our superintendent. Maybe he's Fred. Mako's Daphne. Maybe I'm Velma.
Yeah, Velma.
Velma.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I'm Velma.
yeah. I'm
I
not
just
even
need some
sure.
glasses.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to ask you because like at the end of season 4, I think Mako was kind of mentioning it as well. Like we're starting to see this kind of love interest between you and her character. Like now there's people that like that. There's people that love character development. But like I guess for your standpoint, do you like that idea where the show is going in that kind of route where it's like, okay, you're drawing people in obviously for the mystery of like who committed this murder, but
Yeah.
there's also maybe this side of like, okay, will they, won't they? Like they're starting to kind of get their own development. Now, before you answer that, like I kind of bring into TV shows like, you know, Friends, you knew right off the bat that there's something going on with like Rachel and Ross. Big
Right.
Bang Theory, you get it with Leonard and Penny. But then like other characters come into play in Big Bang Theory and they start to branch off. But then you maybe watch Big Bang Theory a different way for those characters. Do you think that's kind of where Hudson and Rex is going, where people will watch it for murder, but there are people that are watching it now almost like, all right, I'm invested in these characters. What's going on?
Yeah, I think that's all really good point. It's I think we can afford that now that we're in the 5th season, and the fact that we've established this expectation with the procedural elements of the show, the case every week. You know that we're going to slowly unravel it until until Act 5, where we figure out who the murderer is, and so I think people have that expectation, and now that they've seen 64 episodes, which is where we're at the start of season 5, I think there's been a desire to sort of see the characters a little bit more as how they interact with each other, and instead of just from a plot perspective, starting to see some of the character perspective, and also I think even for the writers and the actors on the show, there's a need for the storylines and the characters and the story worlds to grow and evolve. So yeah, I guess it's partially a process of keeping it fresh, and partly a process of the audience getting to see some of the stuff that they post on social media and stuff come to fruition, and not to give any spoilers away of where Sarah and Charlie are going, but obviously if people watched the last episode, they of season 4, they noticed that we discuss Charlie and Sarah discuss having interest in each other. So obviously that's the first time that anything really has happened at all. So yeah, I think it's really, that's the thing, is that I think that over time the audience trusts that they're going to see the things that they love, and then they'll slowly, other storylines will evolve as well.
Yeah, like because I think with most TV shows or like anything, like even movies and stuff, you kind of start to see it ravel, and that kind of creates its own fan base of certain aspects of like, well, here's the moment where this should have happened, or here's a moment where you start to see it. Like I'll be honest, like I'm not heavily up on every episode. Like when it comes on, I'll watch it, but I've got some binge watching to do per se. But like I remember there's one where you both get stuck in maybe an ice rink, or like the freezing part of the ice rink.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like in order to keep yourselves alive or whatever, you have to cuddle together. And then I was like, okay, this is, I guess, where they're starting the motion. Because like if you don't like the person or you don't have feelings at all, you're kind of like, I would rather die than be cuddled with you. And I'm just like, I've heard that one before. No, so I'd rather, but like I feel like that's where it kind of started. Now other people would say that's where the fan base starts to come in, and they'll be like, well, actually, if you look at this episode over here, it's like he looks at her a certain way, or she says this in this certain manner. I'm like, okay, so it's
Yeah.
like they start to develop it themselves. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to point that out, because you do start to see it, and then there's people that like the mystery part, and then there's people that like characters developing over time. And I feel like if the character doesn't, if it just stays the same thing, it's almost like, all right, well, I know how every episode's going to go. Like there's nothing there to kind of watch anymore.
Yeah, and it's certainly a balancing act too, because like the episode that episode in the ice rink, that was season one actually.
Yeah.
So it was probably halfway through season one, and so at that point we'd already alluded a little bit to, or at least the audience had perhaps put together, oh, Charlie and Sarah could be a potential future couple, and so we kind of just stayed at that level for, this kind of subtextual.
It's something to progress.
Right? Yeah. So it felt like that had played itself out, and needed to go somewhere else. And so I think that's probably why it's kind of evolved a little bit. And it's also been fun to play because we've had all these little things, and it's amazing how many subtle things people will pick up on, and then write on a message board or whatever. But then we have to go back and think, okay, there was all these episodes. How did we, how did all that stuff, sort of evolve? And now we have to work that into, their relationship as well. So it's been good. It's been fun. It's fun to sort of see, to see new things in the characters.
Now, do you find, because I've read sometimes online, like the comparison obviously down here in Newfoundland too, especially when you film down here, is like there's comparisons with like certain shows like Republic of Doyle. You've had Alan Hocko on.
Yep.
We made the joke to Alan when he was on this show that like the leather jacket was a part of the budget, where it's like he has to have the leather jacket, and Alan did not like it. Alan joked about it, but like, do you ever, like, I kind of made reference to it. So now that I've had like the head honcho on, I want like kind of your input of it. But like, you bring in Alan Hocko, but you don't bring in like the whole kind of Republic of Doyle factor. Now, Mary Welch, very opinionated, respect her for it, but she was like, yeah, but that show's been over for like years. Why would they do that? But do you ever think there's a possibility that in the future episodes where it's like you have this big case, and it's like, all right, we need help solving this. Do you think there's ever a potential of a crossover?
That we need Jake Doyle to come in and help us out?
Maybe that'll be the episode I'm involved in, because, by this time you and Sarah maybe are married, got kids, and like I'm this big master plan abductor, and then you need the help.
I think that would be brilliant. And we also have Alan Doyle on our show, who plays a recurring character, and he was in Republic of Doyle as well. So, we could have infinite crossovers, really. But we could. Alan Hocko played my best friend growing up.
Yeah. So
I definitely think he could make a return via that. I'm not sure how CBC would like us.
Oh, right. That's true. Yeah.
Not that I have no idea, but I like where you're going, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, you know what?
I like the thought process.
I didn't think about that, because then there are obviously like there's rights to character names and rights to like, hey, you're using certain appeals to ours. It's like, all right, it's not Jake Doyle. It's Jack Doyle or something. And then it's like, we see where you're going. It's like, but we didn't use the character name. So thinking outside the box.
That's right. You just call him JD.
Yeah, JD. There you go. Yeah. There's always ways around things, I'm sure.
There's always ways. One of the funniest things about having Hocko on the show was he came up to me. It was the first episode of season 2, and he's like, he came onto the set, and of course it's the same crew who had done 6 seasons of Doyle, and he came in, and it's the first day, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had just come out.
Okay.
He's like, I feel like DiCaprio coming to set, Timothy Oliphant's set, where he's got the Western show that used to be his show.
Yeah.
And then he goes in and out, and he's like, he goes to his trailer, has 6 whiskey sours, and he's like, talks about the GD whiskey sours, and I hadn't seen the show I hadn't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at the time, and so I didn't really quite grasp what it was that he was getting at.
Yeah.
But it was, I watched it later that week, and it was pretty funny because in so many aspects we're the same. You know, there's a lot of the same, people doing it, and a lot of the same connections. They give us the locations and everything like that. So it's, it must have felt pretty weird coming on there and playing a different character.
I feel like it has to be like somewhat similar is if I was doing this podcast and like just say 5 years down the road, this is over, someone else takes it over, like brings it back from like the dead or something. And it's just another person called Tobin, and then they're doing interviews, and then I'm like number 5, and they're like, yeah, so how surreal does it feel to be on this? I'm like, it's my show still, right? It's like I'm still me, right? And they're like, no, but you're a guest on. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's weird. I'm a guest on a podcast that I started. Okay, so yeah,
Dobbins tonight.
Yeah, Dobbins. Yeah. I'd be a little bit like, could you at least find someone else named Tobin? Can you at least keep the name brand? They were like,
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty in Newfoundland. That wouldn't be hard. I want to ask, I guess a little bit of a fun question here for you, but like, doing so many episodes, like, do you have a favorite or do you have a favorite scene? Because I feel like sometimes working with animals can be entertaining, sometimes stressful. For those, I don't want to break the wall here, but for those that don't know, it's like, necessarily John is not guiding the dog. There is someone on the set that has control of Diesel, but do you like that aspect? Are there challenges to it? Like, tell me the whole mindset of like maybe your favorite episode and some challenges you deal with in terms of the dog. We're not trying to like cast the dog to someone else or like, but animals, sure. They can be challenging.
Yeah, I love, it's like one of my favorite parts of the show actually is working with Diesel and Sherry, and Vic, who is Sherry's right-hand girl, and they they're cast as well as us, and I think it's like unlike any show that I've ever done before, because we block and it involves training type stuff within it. So it has like a different technical aspect to it. But you kind of never really know fully what's going to happen and how he's going to react. And so it kind of forces you to be on your toes, and it forces you to really be kind of like present with what's going on.
Yeah.
And Diesel and I we're good buds. Like, it's really quite endearing because he gets very protective of me. And he gets very worried if he thinks that I'm in a stressful state. Like we had one scene where we get trapped in a mine, and of course we're in the studio and we're under styrofoam beams and all this stuff, and on camera it looks very dangerous, and we're in this precarious situation, and we're sipping tea while we're in between takes. We're pretty comfortable, but once we got into shooting the scene and it feels like we're pretty anxious, and he's sitting there next to us, he was incredibly distressed. And he would keep coming up to us to make sure we're okay. Also, if we're doing any fight sequences or anything like that, he's always very cognizant of like if he's worried that we're upset and stuff. He's incredibly empathetic, and so yeah, it's been cool. Like we've really developed a bond as partners on the show that kind of is like the partners in the show too. So Yeah, I really like it, and I like, you know, the process of incorporating all the dog training into the show as well. Sherry is who's the head trainer and Diesel's owner is just absolutely incredible. She trains dogs, big cats. She trained 200 rats for a movie.
Oh
She's going to be
wow.
a snake handler in the next in our one of our next episodes. She's just it's kind of like, you know, on like Letterman when they'd have like the crocodile hunter come in with like 3 animals.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that but cooler.
There's a little bit of cleverness to it. I want to ask in terms of like season 5, like what, because I know like right now as we speak, it's probably either debuting or it's going to be debuted by this point. But like,
Mm-hmm.
what things were you excited about, like generally in filming season 5, aspects that you can kind of give us details without giving the whole picture? Because listen, I'm not here to spill details. I don't want people to listen in and be like, "Hey, man, I haven't even watched season 5. You're talking about how it's premiering and you're giving stuff away."
Right, right. Well, without without giving any Game of Thrones spoilers
Exactly. There you go.
or anything along that lines, no red weddings in Rex this year. Uh, One thing that I'm really excited about for season 5 is we start shooting earlier, so we have less or we have more. We maximize our summer shooting,
Nice.
which means we're going to be shooting in some really cool locations. And we're shooting in some places, this year that we haven't shot yet, which is hard to believe considering, we've gone, 64 episodes already, but there's lots of cool locations. And then I'm really kind of looking forward to the new dynamic between the characters because all of our characters have some new aspects to either our job or our relationships. Not to get too specific, but
Yeah.
each one of us has like an arc that we're sort of our characters are following for the season, and it'll just be different than how our characters, the situation our characters have been in the past. For Charlie, a lot of that might be sort of relationships with the characters. Jesse, it's more involved with his work, and so it's fun new stuff for us to play, and I think it'll be fun new stuff for the audience to see the characters doing different stuff and maybe not necessarily in their comfort zone all the time. So it's always fun to watch people scramble.
Yeah. How do you feel like, just like personally with yourself, with like your character, Charlie? Like, because, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, like characters develop and they grow. Like, have you found Charlie to kind of grow? Because I mean, like, there's still obviously the relationship, like from the very first episode of, getting Rex to kind of trust you and, befriend him per se. But like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of things do you think Charlie has developed with over the years in terms of, like, because I look at sometimes when you look at shows, sometimes it's like characters are pretty stagnant, but there's like little minor details that you're like, all right, in season 1, maybe they wouldn't have responded that way, but by season 5, they've gone through some shit. And it's almost like now they're like, okay, I see it differently.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think Charlie's gone through too many any sea changes or anything.
Yeah.
Um, I think with the sort of the procedural aspect, we've had to keep things sort of fairly neutral in that regard up until now. I'd say, but there's been like a subtle intention to, him and and Rex sort of play off on each other a little bit, and they rub off on each other over time. So, Charlie, when he first started, was very good at his job, but probably lacked in his personal life.
Yeah.
And, with Rex, I think he's kind of been able to patch a lot of those, those leaks. And I think his personal life, he's starting to get more of a handle on that because of his relationship with Rex. It's informed him to be a better detective as well. And I also think it's kind of like, how when you have a pet, the pet kind of looks like the owner and the owner kind of looks like the pet.
Oh yeah. There's certain, yeah.
I think there's that vibe going on too. Cause Charlie, he was very buttoned down, had the tie, the suit. Now he's wearing, cool jackets, shearling collars and stuff like that. He's, getting in touch with his natural side, his animal side.
Yeah. Okay. That makes it sound cooler. I was gonna be like, he's getting in touch with his like dad side, where it's like, it's like, all right, it's like I'm no longer like gonna be this hard hitting, like suave guy. It's like I'm just gonna be like, hey, it's like that's like cool dad. It's like oh, it's like cool dad mode has been activated. It's like instead of like I'm glad they don't go that the full aspect, because can you imagine when you like dig up a case or something, instead of being like okay, we gotta take this serious, you just come be like, hey dude, hey man, what'd you do that for? It's like, seriously, this guy?
It could be an epic opportunity for some great dad jokes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of which, in my personal life, I aspire to. It's a level of wisdom that I aspire to.
You like the dad jokes? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I'm starting to realize that I have like a real talent for it. Like I've always kind of wondered what my talent in life is, and it may be dad joking.
Yeah, I feel like you should try. I've heard this one was an old one, but I've seen it on like Instagram recently, where it's like yeah, have you heard the news? Like a famous actress died. It's like, I'm terrible with actresses' names. It's like Reese, and then the person's supposed to respond like Witherspoon, and then you go, no, actually with a knife. And it's like I'm just still like I'm sure there's people like boo, but I'm just still like, as a dad, that's kind of the input, is like your jokes are supposed to be corny. So
I respect that. That.
Yeah. Now you have, I mean, to kind of branch off from the Hudson and Rex side to get into a little bit, like, because we like to have fun conversations here as well, get to know a little bit more about the actors or the people that we have on. Kind of transitions really well, because when we're talking about dad jokes, you actually have 2 young children, correct?
Yep, I do.
So like, what's the dynamic? Like, what's the age, and like, what's the gender?
Well, I have a 4-year-old boy who's actually, his name is Hudson.
Okay.
He was born a year. Well, he's almost 5, I guess. So he was almost a year old when the show started. And it was actually one of the reasons I ended up doing the show, because my wife and I just bought a house in Los Angeles, and we were moving into it. And, when this show came up, they had asked me if I was interested in coming out east to work on it. And I said, well, we've just kind of settled down here in LA. So I'm just not sure it's the right timing. And my wife read the script, and she said, I was out running errands or something, getting stuff at Home Depot to set the house up. And I came home, and she's like, well, first off, your character's name is Hudson, and your partner is a German Shepherd, and I'm a huge animal lover, and
okay.
Grew up with dogs, and so I was like, oh, well, I should probably read that then. And so I love the script, and I really wanted to do it, and I really wanted to be in Newfoundland. So we came out here, but we had only thought we were going to be here for 2.5 months, and now it's almost 4 years later.
Yeah, like
which is
I want to ask you that. Like, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but like,
Oh
because
no,
it's
no.
it's interesting to me because sometimes with like actors and when they send you scripts, it's almost like, okay, like if you're a high profile actor or like you got things under your belt and you say no, like that person come back and be like, all right, our loss because we really wanted him, but listen, we can't go back to like Tom Hanks and say, all right, screw you, Tom Hanks, we don't need you anyway, because they're like, no, we kind of wanted Tom Hanks, but like when like for you, did you ever feel any pressure to, if you say no, it's almost like, oh man, like they're never gonna come back to me anytime ever again to ask? Because we've had people come on that are honest and say, I'm worried. Like sometimes if I turn down a script, even if I'm in a bad place, it's almost
Hmm.
like I just don't want to do it. But I don't want that to come across as like I hate you, I hate your guts, I hate everything about the script. It's like I'm just busy.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I feel a lot less like that as I've gotten older. I definitely felt when I was first starting out, I had to kind of maximize every opportunity, but I've really kind of gotten to the point where um, I've found that if something is kind of a good fit, then that it tends to sort of work out. And if it isn't, it doesn't, and it's easier than sort of chasing it. Um, because I think, especially now having kids, I feel like I obviously love my work and I love what I do, but it's kind of, you know, it's backseat to my family and what's best for that, for them. And so I kind of, you know, I had no problem, saying no when it sort of felt like, uh, we were sort of setting down roots in LA. But um, once I was really excited about the project and my family was excited to go too, then getting here, it just all kind of fell into place because my son absolutely loves Newfoundland. My daughter, Anya, who is almost 3, is a townie. So she was born here in Newfoundland, and that definitely ups my street cred. Like,
Yeah.
huge. Because
Yeah.
before that, I was kind of like, well, yes, you're from Halifax, but you're still a mainlander. But now I feel like I kind of
You
like
have
I
a
have a blood
tie.
connection to the Rock. So,
Yeah.
uh, and now we have another one coming too. So
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Geez, John. Like, keep them busy. But there are times and places,
We
I
figured
want
this just needed a
yeah,
few more Reardons in Newfoundland.
yeah. I want to ask because like obviously moving from LA to Newfoundland is a jump, and there's the aspects of I can see why people like LA. I like the weather, obviously. There's sports teams. There's plenty to do in LA, but like I know obviously there's the tie of the East Coast, which kind of helps. Because I mean, if you try to tell someone from like I don't know Boston or maybe, but I'll use the example of Boston. If you're like you're in the States, you either get to go to LA or Newfoundland. I'm pretty sure they'd be like, I'll take my chance with LA. I'll still root for my Boston teams. But if you tell them
Mhm.
Newfoundland, like I have no idea where that is. Now, maybe they have roots to Newfoundland for their ancestors, but I feel like the East Coast vibe kind of helped a little bit being an East Coaster for you to be like, hey, we're going to Newfoundland. It's only an hour and a half away from where I'm actually born and raised. And we're filming here anyway. So why not? Compared to like, but I'm sure that was a process in terms of like, okay, but like, oh, like LA has good things too. So I mean, I'd like to think it was the script that finally sold you, but were there other things in mind that you're kind of like, well, actually, if we get to go here, I'm excited to do this. I'm excited for this.
It was definitely a selling feature for me to come, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
because being here before, I had loved it. And you just kind of like, even when I first got back, came here, it's like the air is the same as home. The water is the same as home. The people, I like walk around and I'm like everybody, and I'm like, yeah, these are my people. And I've been in LA for 15 years, and I always kind of you know, felt like I was trying to fit in, sort of thing. I just,
Yeah.
like, I wasn't, you know, I just hadn't grown up there, and so it was still a little bit, you know, new to me, and had amazing aspects, and I absolutely loved being there for the time that we were there. But I mean, I'm more of an East Coast guy myself. My wife's from Victoria,
Okay.
so she grew up on the West Coast, and but her family has subsequently moved out east. So it
Oh,
kind of
wow.
just it kind of just
It
you know,
worked.
kind of just fit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
I like how when you mentioned the whole LA part of like, you know, like, oh, we've been for 15 years. And I was like, yeah, as if I know. It's like, oh yeah, I was like, I totally know about that. It's like, yeah, I lived in LA for like 15 years myself. Like, no. I want to ask to kind of a little bit of a fun aspect here is like, you know, when you're filming Hudson and Rex, are there
Mhm.
like, have they ever asked you to do something like, I know sometimes now we live in a world where you can say no, you can find ways around it, but have they ever said like, we want you to jump through a glass window, or we want you to like, you know, roll around in this dirt, but like, hey, you know, it's going to be down a very steep hill. Have you ever had moments where
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. Can we, you know, can we work something else out?
Well, it's actually been the exact opposite.
Oh, okay, go
They
getter. Make me look
they
stupid.
really, yeah. Well, I mean, they, I think, want to make sure, keep me safe as possible, and you know, um, uh, want to make sure that I'm never in a situation where I, you know, feel uncomfortable or you know, could get hurt. Whereas I am far more reckless, and so I'm constantly asking them to let me do stuff, which, you know, I feel at this point they're kind of just like, oh God, who's going to have the conversation with John now
Yeah, yeah,
to say that he can't do this? But it's we've I think there's been a good, we found a happy medium of where they let me do some fun things that are relatively benign,
yeah.
uh, and and that's like satiated my thrill-seeking desire. But yeah, no, it's I love that stuff. As an ex you know, football player and athlete and stuff, I like to, you know, do all
That
the physical stuff. But
all right. That's fair because
yeah,
if someone ever asked me like, hey, Brian, we got this thing pitched for you, but you're going to like jump out of an airplane, I'd be like, all right, and how much is that worth? And they'd be like, this is the paycheck. I'd be like, I'm not sure. I'm like, I'm afraid of heights. And then I'd look at the paycheck and I'd still be like, you know, is it worth it? And then they'd be like, that's a lot of money, man. I'd be like, yeah, but no. It's like, I'd like to be able to live to cash to check, not like fall out of the sky halfway through, be like, so guess what? He didn't complete it and we get to keep the money. So win-win. I'd be like, that is cruel.
yeah.
uh,
That's a dark narrative you just created there.
yeah.
I just like sort of went down that rabbit hole there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not like, I just think of it that way in terms of like, cause sometimes you look at movies and stuff and you feel bad because like, I think it's like again, I mentioned about being a wrestling fan and there's a character or a wrestler named Sting and they tell you how he developed his character from like the Crow movie. I think it's the Crow and then like, but you go in and read it a little bit more and then obviously the actor, I think it's that movie that the actor like dies during the scene because they were supposed to do like a fake shooting and like it's a big topic obviously still to this day of like the
Mm-hmm.
guns being loaded or whatnot. And I was like, yeah, I was like, how is that not in today's world where it's just like with all like the animations and stuff you can do where it's like, can't you just maybe don't have that scene or like figure out a different way to implement that? Cause like
Yeah.
there's so many accidents that just don't need to happen.
Yeah, and I mean that is yeah, that's I remember when that happened. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day actually. The Crow is one of the movies that I watched as a kid that I that I loved so much, that I loved movies, and it kind of wanted to, you know,
Yeah.
I wanted to get into the industry. But you know, it's, at the end of the day, we're making movies, and you know, nobody should ever get hurt, and nobody should ever be in a situation where they're fearing for their safety and feel uncomfortable like that. We're when we don't even use real guns. Like on set. We have guns that don't fire, and they're Ubisoft guns, so they don't even shoot ammo. They have the action that's caused by a very, gentle release of compressed gas, but you can do so much with special effects, and it just, I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Let's go on a brighter note here to kind of wrap it up, John.
That was a great movie, though, The Crow.
Yeah,
that was an absolutely spectacular movie, and I think one of those sort of cult movies for, like, if you were a teenage boy when that came out, guaranteed you had The Crow makeup at Halloween. One Halloween,
I feel like for my generation, it was like going at Halloween and you'd see just a whole bunch of people with Scream masks, and you're like, all right, we get it, you like Scream. Going to like a grade 5 like school party, I'm like, how many Screams are in this room? And then they got the ones that had like the blood pumps, and then you'd see like the red. I don't know how they did it, but like it was there, and I was like, oh, like that's kind of gross, but sure, we're all Scream for the 3rd straight year. Great.
What a great Scream movie that would be. All these kids going in Scream masks, and everybody be like, oh, everybody's wearing a Scream mask. And then one was actually the murderer.
There you go. That's something to pitch.
It's called Dimension Films. Let's get this. Scream 11.
Scream 11. I want to ask you for a fun aspect. Do you want to play a game of kind of random questions?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So the first random question here is, if today was your last day on Earth, what would be the first thing that you would like to do?
Ooh. Oh. Go get ice cream with my kids, with my family, I think.
All right.
That's yeah, I think that, because my kids absolutely love. My kids like me more when I've given them ice cream. So I like to keep them in that zone. But like, fortunately, I have a wife who reminds me that I can't just constantly give them ice cream.
Yeah. That would be weird if, like, going to university at Munn or something, if they like enroll in Munn and be like, hey, your dad's here, I got you some ice cream. It's like, Dad, I still like it, but this is kind of weird, don't you think? You'd be like, just trying to earn some brownie points.
Yeah, that's just building some equity.
Yeah. The other one they have here, let's see, just waiting for it. Oh, okay. What is your biggest fear?
What is my biggest fear? That's going. Rats.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like rats. I don't mind spiders and snakes, but when we were living in LA, I remember my wife said one night, she's like, oh, there's a bunch of squirrels running across the power lines. Do you mind going outside, turning on the light, and scaring them away? And I went outside and I flicked the lights on, and there was probably like 10 rats running across, big,
oh geez,
like long tails, big rats, man-eating rats, I'm sure. And running across, and it was like such a primal feeling, you know what I mean? It just like, yeah, I didn't like it. Rats are up there.
That's fair. I feel like my experience, like I hate heights, but my experience in terms of like just rodents is that when I was at Carleton and I came out one time, it was like really early in the morning, because we had like, sometimes it was the early classes, and you had to get up and get ready and all this garbage and kind of associate with garbage, because here was a raccoon just like right in, and like I have never seen a raccoon full front, like, full in your face. And here
full
it was
frontal,
just like
a full frontal raccoon.
Yeah, just like right.
That
right
would be
there.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it was just like right there in front of me, and it was like, I was like, okay, like I've dealt with squirrels where you kind of walk past or like whatever, and it's like, let them be. But this guy was just looking at me like, what's up? And I was like, do I walk by and just be like, all right, you can go through the garbage, I'm not going to mind you? Or if he's going to look at me and be like, I know what you're doing, you're going to report me. And I was like, okay. So I just stood there and I was like, I almost felt like texting my friend, be like, I'm not making it to class today. And if they're like, why? I'd be like, just don't feel well. Because you're not going to tell your friend like, hey, a raccoon full frontal in front of me, and it's a bit much, so I'm not making it in.
He stared me down. He wouldn't let me pass.
Yeah, it's like they just be like, tell all your friends or something, and like you go on a date 3 years later, it's like, hey, you the guy that was afraid of a squirrel, like or a raccoon? I'd be like, oh, to be fair, that raccoon was a lot more than what was in store.
He was giving you the Gandalf Mines of Moria, thou shalt not pass.
Exactly.
Routine,
and how and why would I disobey? Why would I disobey that?
It's legit, guaranteed.
Okay, so the next random one is what would be, I guess, your best, oh, there it is. Okay, what would be your best case scenario for like a role that you would like to play? I guess I guess the way they're wording it is like if someone came and pitched you an idea, it's like, like what would be the best role that you want?
Yeah.
If you say Marvel or DC movie, I'm just gonna rip you. I'm just gonna
no. That you're gonna start me on a whole other tangent because I don't know. I'm not opposed to comic book movies in any facet, but I just feel like there's
so many, man.
The world needs some new stuff.
Yeah.
And we're recycling the same old stuff, and I think it's time for a little bit more, a little wider variety in things. I'd like to I don't know, I'd like to do something like shoot something really guerrilla style out in the woods somewhere in kind of like an exotic location that's hard to get to. Like I always used to love, watching the making of movies where they went somewhere that they, you don't normally film, like, Apocalypse Now when they went to Cambodia to film, and, Brando just kind of disappeared and they had to rewrite the script because they had no idea where he was. And you can kind of feel like that they've gone out into the the wilds. Game of Thrones did that really well with all the different locations that they were shooting in, that especially when they were up in north of the Wall and stuff, and you could just really tell that there were places that hadn't been on film that much. So I think I'd love to do something like that. I feel Newfoundland would be really great for that because there's so many parts of the province that I think a lot of people haven't, there's sort of the famous places that, when you come here and, people say, go see Cape Spear and, Signal Hill and everything. But there's so, like, the entire province is just like a postcard on the, just everywhere is a giant cliff going into the sea. And I feel like there would be some really spectacular, lesser known locations, and you could shoot something pretty, pretty dark and moody.
You're an East Coaster. Like I've grown up in Newfoundland and seeing commercials from like Hockey Night in Canada where you'd see like visit ontario.ca because they're showing you Ontario tourism commercials. And I used to love watching like the Marineland commercials, like, watching like they used to have like just say a no-name singer that we didn't know the name of at the time. Now there was one that they had Keisha Shante in when I was really small to kind of sell you on Ontario. And I used to think like, okay, Parliament Hill, Hockey Hall of Fame, it all got to be like pretty close together. I'm like, no, Ontario's pretty goddamn big. So it's like when you're like, you sold me on hopes. You didn't sell me on how much this was going to cost. But I feel like in Newfoundland, it's like my biggest takeaway with Newfoundland commercials is, yes, you're selling people on the scenery. You're selling them on, like, I guess, the language. And like, we literally have commercials saying when you come to Newfoundland, the language is totally different from everywhere else. I'm like, don't know how that can be a selling point. Some people are like, well, then how the hell are we going to get around if we don't understand the people? But my biggest takeaway is there's one that's like Lansom Meadows, and then they show you the population, and it's like 5 people. I'm like, I get you want to go to Lansom Meadows for the history, but why do you have to show that there's 5 people living there? Like, who's that for?
Yeah. I agree. It's like, you know, I always find that when you know, like leaning into a cliche of the place, you never get to know that place.
Yeah.
And it's, I 100% know what you mean, because it's like, oh, come to these places so you can tick off on your, you know, tick the box that you've been to these places. Sure, those places are great to go check out, but you know, you don't really know. You never know a place until you spend some time there and meet some local people, and you can kind of, you know, you can go get screeched in.
Have you?
And get. I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but actually before I came here, so I don't know if it's official. I got screeched in when I was at Mount A. But
I'm not counting that. I'm not counting that. That's in Mount A.
Oh, okay.
No,
so it's got to be on the soil, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll have to head down to Christians.
Yeah, I guess you're gonna have to take your whole cast with you and, like, you know, make sure they're all screeched in if they're not already like born and raised here, right? That's the thing.
I think I'm the only one who hasn't been.
Okay.
Because
well, there we go. Season 5 won't be happening now because the main guy hasn't been screeched in. Not allowed. No.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to set this up.
You're gonna have to set it up. Maybe we'll set it up on a podcast, and maybe we'll have it like a live stream, and then, you know, then everyone will be like, oh, whew, now he's an actual Newfoundlander. Okay, now we can go back and watch Hudson and Rex and be like, you know what, official now.
I like it. Let's do that. So do I get to choose between the cod and the puffin's arse?
No.
Or
come
does
on
that
now.
have to be
Come
chosen
on now.
for me?
I think that's chosen, man. That's chosen. It's
just whatever we have access to, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder, like, you know what? I wonder if there's other parts in other provinces, like, if they do that tradition, because, like, I'm very surprised with the way the world is now, where there hasn't been a case where people are like, can we just get rid of the screeched in? Like, it's no longer acceptable. I'm like, you know what? People probably don't mind the drinking part. They don't mind reciting the story that they have to recite. I do think the whole kissing in the cod part, maybe people would be like, I'm not doing that. That's fair. But I just feel like it's a part of the routine. Like, we're not like.
I feel like that's the crux of it all. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're gonna climb Everest 3/4 of the way. It's the last quarter that you know. That's the glory. You know, that's the glory part.
Yeah.
So
I like that you're calling kissing the cod the glory part. There are people out there that would probably be like, that is the worst part, but we have to do it. It's like tying. Let's put it this way. It's like tying in the Stanley Cup final, the game 3-3 to go to overtime. Yeah, you're happy you're going to overtime, but you're also like so drained that you're like, all right, it's like we got to win it now. Otherwise, we just tied it for no reason. So I feel like that's like kissing the cod. It's like, I've done everything else, but until I kiss the cod, I'm not full. I'm not fully complete.
It's not because it's the part that you least want to do.
Yeah.
It's the part that earns it for you. It's like okay. He can kiss a raw codfish on the lips.
Yeah. He's committed.
Then he's allowed to stay at least a little bit longer.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to John Reardon for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.